I've been researching the correlation between religious belief and time allocation ratios. So, why religion? I've always been interested in religion, and I was thinking about my friends one day, and I realized we all come from different religious backgrounds, and I think that's really cool because we can still get along despite that. So that led me to the question, how does what we believe affect our everyday behavior? More specifically, are you more productive as a spiritual person as you are as a non-spiritual person? So ultimately, religion is subjective, so there's controversy over whether or not it can be quantified. That's why I turned to economics. So economics is the quantification of human preferences. It's based on the idea that the individual is rational, and that's basically they maximize benefits and minimize costs in all choices in life. So that got me to thinking, how people spend their time reflects their fundamental beliefs. So therefore, someone who is spiritual will spend time differently than someone who is not spiritual. So it's through that I said that the more spiritual you are, the more productive you'll be. So to measure this, I used time allocation, which is how you spend your time. There's 3 types: constant time, which includes eating, sleeping, working, anything that is a necessity to life. And capital time is anything that is productive time, so spending time with family, exercising, bettering yourself as a whole. Then there's consumable time, which is the exact opposite. It's unproductive time. There's time on social media, time watching television, video games, things like that. So to measure this, I conducted a survey. It was 49 questions, 3 sections, a background info section on age, gender, ethnicity, a religious section, and a time allocation section measuring different activities, how often people did that activity, and how much time they spent on that activity per day. So there's 330 responses, which is well over the 200 that I had expected. So they were all from the Rockford area. It's very exciting. So in order to make my data viable, I had to get large enough sample sizes per group. So I basically ended up splitting it up into 6 different groups: Buddhist, Catholic, Protestant, Sunni Muslim, non-believer, and other. So non-believers include atheists and agnostics. Others include people who are unsure about their religion, or maybe are spiritual but don't identify with a single group. It also included other religions that I couldn't fit into any other group. So measuring time allocation ratios. So I took the sum of the time spent in capital activities and divided it by the sum spent in consumable activities. Each activity was done by multiplying the frequency of that activity per week by the time spent per day, and I divided that by 7 days per week. So therefore, ratios greater than 1 are going to spend more time capitally than consumably, and ratios less than 1 will spend more time consumably than capitally. So quick stats lesson before we get started. Z values refer to the number of standard deviations from the mean. So the mean in this case is 0. The Z value would be 1.645, which is the number of standard deviations from 0. P-value corresponds with Z values in that it's the probability that something will not happen for reasons not due to chance. Therefore, a high p-value disproves a hypothesis, and a low p-value proves that hypothesis. So before we got to the nitty-gritties, we had to test against confounding variables: gender, age, and spirituality. There was no significant difference found between any of these groups and time allocation ratios. As we can see, there might be a significant difference between the other category in the genders, but we have to realize that the other category consisted of only 7 individuals, which is a very small number and therefore probably not accurate data. So now on to the meat of the project. I did a chi-squared test of comparing religious groups and time allocation ratios. I did find that there's a significant difference between how people of different religions spent their time. So we can see that from the small p-value there. So in order to find the exact correlation, I did 15 two-proportion Z tests, which basically compares whether or not there's a difference between one religious group from another religious group. So assuming that all the conditions are met, we find here the results. This is the Z-value table. So for instance, the Catholic and Buddhist comparison is 0.292 standard deviations from the mean, and the corresponding p-values are listed here. So as you can see, there's a significant difference between the other and the Protestant category. It's less than 0.05. Now if we increase that alpha value to 0.1, we see there's a significant difference between the other category and the other religious or non-religious groups. What that means is that our hypothesis is not supported, in that there's no difference between religious and non-religious groups, which means that no matter what you believe, everyone behaves similarly. There's no reason to hate someone on the basis of their faith. What that also says is that those who identify with a religious or non-religious group act significantly more productive than those who do not identify with a single religious group or non-religious group. So that implies there's benefits to belonging. So being a part of something bigger than yourself can affect your behavior in a positive way. That being said, there's many limitations to this study. For example, it's only 330 participants within the Rockford area. That's a very small demographic, and it's within one culture. Obviously, as a high school student, I'm not able to get a perfectly random sample. This was a convenient sample, so there's many biases with that. However, I'm sure there's better ways to measure time allocation more accurately, as well as religious beliefs more accurately. I did the best I could. I tried to keep it as unbiased a question as I could, but there's always room for improvement. Also, I wanted to see if maybe there's another confounding variable that I did not test against, so such as culture or any other factors that affect time allocation. So, and if this correlation is true, I want to find the mechanisms behind this. So future studies could include finding a causation between religion and time allocation using different mechanisms within those two groups. For more information, feel free to visit my website at religicon.weebly.com. Thank you for everyone who helped in distributing my surveys, as well as everyone who helped and gave me advice and the resources I needed in finishing this project. Thank you.
I wonder if you considered controlling other variables. Like, I'll be honest with you, what popped in my head, for example, I lived in Japan for 2 years, and actually the Japanese are among the most a-religious group of people overall.
Mm-hmm.
So some might argue it's more other factors at work on why, for example, the Japanese, and again, I don't mean totally start, but
right.
Typically are pretty studious
Right.
and value education very highly. So did you consider other variables at work?
Yeah. I don't know if we can go back, but like there was that confounding variable slide, and I know that this is one culture and one demographic. There we go. Yeah, so, thank you. These were the confounding variables I did test against. However, yes, you're right, I wasn't able to test against different cultures because, I'm only in one demographic, so future studies could definitely cover that.
The other thing I was wondering if, because I've heard a lot of studies that connect stress relief actually with some religious practices, such as like prayer, meditation, that kind of thing. Is that something you could foresee too?
Definitely, yeah. As in future studies, I know it's a growing field of research between religion and economics in general, and that's definitely one of the things that people can look at.
Because stress certainly can be connected to economic loss.
Yeah.
What happened to constant time?
Constant time is not considered, so I subtracted that from the entire the consumable versus capital time, because constant time is, well, everyone does it, right? Everyone has to sleep, and everyone has to eat and stuff like that. So I didn't factor that in because it's not necessary for quantifying the ratios.
So what would it look like that you took it out?
That I took it out?
So like consider like Amish and I say I spend more constant time than he does. How does that look for our survey?
It shouldn't affect the ratios because I factored it so that I subtracted it from the amount of time that this was spent. So I did find that it wasn't necessary, it wouldn't affect the data at all. I just subtracted that chunk out as a neutral time.
Was there any sort of like level of spirituality, or are you just saying spirituality in general? Or did you look at how spiritual something?
Yeah, there's a huge difference between religion and spirituality. For this one, I did look at religion, but yeah, spirituality I did test against. So I had people self-rank how spiritual they considered themselves, which I thought was interesting because the people who did answer 0 through 4 did show here a slightly less productive time than the people who claimed they were 5 through 10. That means that, well, either they were lying or there is a significant difference there, which can be explored in future studies.
And consumable time, who determined what consumable time was?
So that was based on economic principle. I looked in different economic textbooks and stuff like that for what was considered. And once again, that could be, it's all debatable whether or not it can be quantified. Of course, this is ultimately a very subjective study, but for the sake of that, I did include anyone spending time playing video games, on social media, and watching television.
And that was just something that you had seen. It wasn't that you were determining that was consumable.
Yeah, no, it's just something I've seen.
Okay.
Okay, so how did you define productivity? What does it mean to be productive?
Well, I think that goes back to the capital time, right? So to be productive means you're bettering the self or the community, right? So based on what I found in the economic principles, going back to the consumable time, right?
So who are some theorists that propose that's true? That to be productive means that you have to be contributing value to the community yourself.
Well, yeah, a lot of research has been done with Dr. Jonathan Gruber at MIT or Dr. Azim Shari over at the University of Oregon. He did his research at University of British Columbia, but yeah, so they're definitely leading the way in this kind of research and support them.
Okay, so why did you choose to use productivity as a measure? And do you have any concern that there's a bias in that?
Oh, I'm sure there's a bias somewhere. It's not perfect. It's a very preliminary study. Yeah, but it's definitely worth looking into. Can you repeat that question?
Yes. So why use productivity as a measure for this particular?
Right. So I think time allocation does say a lot about the behavior of a person, and ultimately that was my question in the beginning. Right? Is how does someone's religious beliefs affect their behavior?
Did you consider looking at utilitarianism?
Yeah, that's kind of what this is based on, with the maximize benefits, minimize cost. Of course, that has to do with like the broad society, like greater good of the society more than the individual, which is definitely something we could look into. However, for this sake of this study, I did look at the individual more so than the utilitarian.
Okay, so why does this matter? So why does it matter what religious beliefs and productivity, whether or not they correlate? At the end, you even mentioned that maybe we shouldn't be fighting within religions because there's not so many differences, but I don't see a connection between productivity and religious infighting. So I'm just wondering why this matters at all.
Well, this is a growing field of research, and I think that it needs to be, I guess, continued because it is an interesting subject, and this is a very divergent society. Like more and more, we're becoming more and more, I don't know, distant from these institutions that used to be so tightly, I guess, controlling, you could say, depending on how you look at it. So I think it's interesting to go back to those institutions and see what worked, see what didn't, and see the differences from here and now. So you're looking at postmodernism versus the foundation of Western thought.
Can you give me an example of some of the questions that were on the survey?
Yes, I believe I have the survey in my bag. Do you want me to go get it? Or okay,
You have
okay,
40
yeah.
seconds.
40 seconds, cool. Yeah. So some were like, do you believe in heaven? Do you believe in hell? What do you consider? What are you? And then there's a list of different religions you could answer, or others fill in the blank as well. There was obviously like, what's your year you're born? There was time allocations, like how much time do you spend sleeping per night? How frequently do you organize finances, and how long do you organize finances for that particular time? So it was pretty long, but people usually finished it within 15 minutes.
say, I took the survey, it was very thorough.
Yeah, so I mean, data that I didn't use can always be used in future studies.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool, thanks.